Section 29 of Lectures to Young People. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Lectures to Young People by William B. Sprague. Section 29, Doing Good. Galatians 6:10, Part 2. Let me now secondly call your attention to some of the most important means of doing good. On a subject of so great extent, I must necessarily confine myself to mere hints. It may be proper, however, before I proceed to specify particular means of doing good, to observe that these means are not all equally fitted to every individual, or rather, some of them may be employed with greater effect by some individuals than by others, owing to an original difference of character or to a difference of providential allotments. All of them, however, may, by most or all of you, be employed in a greater or less degree. The comparative importance which you are to attach to each, or the principle by which you are to be governed in your selection, will come into view in a subsequent article of this discourse. I remark, then, 1. In the first place, that one important means of doing good is private conversation. In the circle of your acquaintance, and probably in the circle of your intimate friends, there are many young persons who are living in the neglect, perhaps the open contempt, of religion. With some of them, it may be, you have been associated in a habit of carelessness, and possibly may have contributed your influence to render them insensible to their immortal interests. Now, these especially are the persons toward whose salvation your private efforts are to be directed. You are indeed to address yourself to this duty with prudence, not in a manner to excite disgust, but if possible to secure a favorable and listening regard. Nevertheless, you ought to make a serious and earnest effort to impress them with their guilt and danger, and to bring them to escape from the wrath to come. Or it may be that some of whom you have intercourse are actually awakened to a sense of religion, and are oppressed with the burden of unpardoned sin, and are agitating the momentous question what they must do to be saved. You may do good beyond power of human calculation, by pressing upon such persons the obligations of repentance and faith and holiness, by admonishing them of the danger of resisting the influences of the Holy Spirit, by taking them by the hand, as it were, and leading them into the kingdom. All this you may do in the ordinary intercourse of private friendship, without either being or seeming to be officious or obtrusive. And for aught you can tell, you may by such instrumentality save souls from death and hide a multitude of sins. Moreover, you may do good by private conversation not only to those who are strangers to the power of religion, but also to Christians, and especially to Christians at your own period of life. You may see among your companions some who are beginning to grow unmindful of their Christian obligations, and seem to have entered on a course of backsliding. You may do immense good by meeting them at the threshold of their decline with an affectionate and faithful admonition. You may not only do good to them, but prevent a vast amount of evil to the cause of Christ. And to those of your Christian companions who are watchful and exemplary, you may do good by encouraging them in acts of self-denial, by cherishing in their bosoms a spirit of devotion, by provoking them to love and good works. Especially, you may avail yourself of your intercourse with them to devise plans for the moral and spiritual benefit of your fellow men, or to encourage and assist them in carrying such plans into effect. In short, all your private intercourse with your companions, whether they be Christians or not, may, if rightly conducted, minister either directly or indirectly to the promotion of their best interests. 2. Another efficient means of doing good is furnished by the opportunity of instructing in the Sabbath school. This, I know, may be considered as belonging to the great system of benevolent operations, of which I design to speak more particularly under the next article. But it is of so much importance, and withal belongs so appropriately to young Christians, that I cannot forbear to give it a distinct consideration. Though the Sabbath school institution is yet comparatively in its infancy, it has been too long in existence to require, especially before the youth of this congregation, that its claims should be formally set forth. But I speak in accordance with my most deliberate convictions when I say that you can scarcely employ a more efficient means of doing good than this institution furnishes, none which will tell more loudly or more gloriously on the destinies of individuals, on the destiny of our country, or on the destiny of the world. When you sit down in the Sabbath schoolroom with a few children around you, you may seem to those who look on, and possibly you may seem to yourself, to be accomplishing but little. But rely on it, the results of what you are doing, as they will be seen in the light of eternity, will surprise you. The influence which you exert there may not improbably be felt through your city, and even through your country, and no mortal can say at what point either of time or place it will be arrested. If I were called upon to say what features in the present age is most favorable to the benevolent activity of Christian youth, I should unhesitatingly refer to the fact that it is in the age of Sabbath schools. And I am sure that none of you whose heart has been touched by the benevolence of the gospel will be willing to lose the opportunity of doing good, which is hereby afforded. Let me say then, my young friends, let the Sabbath school come in for a large share of your active regard and support. Instead of regarding it a task, regard it a privilege to engage in it. And that your labors may turn to the best account, qualify yourselves thoroughly for the discharge of your duty. Endeavor to impart in connection with each exercise all the instruction you can. Aim not only to enlighten the understanding, but to impress the heart. And follow up every good impression with pious and affectionate counsels which may be fitted to render it abiding. Consider yourselves as entrusted in a measure with the best interests of your pupils, and let all your efforts be directed, if possible, to secure their salvation. I rejoice that so many of you are already enlisted in this benevolent, this godlike enterprise, enlisted in it, I trust, with a degree of ardor in some measure proportioned to its importance. 3. You have another important means of doing good in the great system of benevolent operations by which the present day is distinguished. The institutions which have grown up during the present age for the diffusion of Christian light and the consequent melioration of the character and condition of man bespeak a new and better era of the world, and they put into the hands of every one, and especially of every youth, facilities for doing good which the wise and virtuous of other ages have desired without having enjoyed. This unquestionably is the great moral machinery by which the world is to be evangelized, and there is not one of you who may not, who ought not, and I think I may say who will not, in some way or other, put forth his hand to keep this machinery in operation. You may aid this great cause in the first place by personal exertion. In sustaining and carrying forward these various institutions, there is a demand for much sober calculation, for much judicious management, for much zealous and faithful cooperation, and that whether you consider each institution as insulated or as making part of a great system of benevolent operation. Here is a field in which you may tax your faculties to the utmost, and which you cannot occupy with success without more or less of intellectual effort. But beside the exertion necessary to guide and control these institutions, there is also a demand for a spirit of enterprise in extending their operation and in enlisting a greater amount of influence in their favor. You may, by suitable measures, bring other youth who have hitherto stood aloof to engage in some great cause, and they, in their turn, may influence others, and so any one of you, for aught you can tell, may give a new impulse to the benevolent operations of a neighborhood or even of a city. And you may help forward the same great cause also by your pecuniary contributions. I do not undertake to prescribe the amount which any one shall give. Nevertheless, I will venture to say, give as the Lord has prospered you. Give as an enlightened and well-regulated conscience dictates. Give as you believe the object will appear to have demanded, when you shall see it in the light of the judgment day. If you are rich, you can give much. If you have only a competence, you can do less. If you are comparatively poor, you can do something. And God, both by His word and providence, assures you that what you give shall not make you the poorer. It is a noble resolution which some young persons have formed, to consecrate a certain part of their earnings to God in the promotion of His cause, and this resolution, to their honor, they have been enabled to keep, even though they have been prospered beyond all their expectations. The world is not to be evangelized without an immense amount of pecuniary contributions, and as you desire that glorious result, and as you desire to be instrumental in bringing it forward, you cannot but esteem it a privilege to contribute of your substance according to your several ability. 4. Another important means of doing good, which is fairly within the reach of all of you, is holy example. There is a power in a consistent, devoted Christian life which belongs to nothing else, and which greatly increases the power of each particular effort that you may put forth. For instance, you may talk much on the subject of religion and occasionally manifest a deep interest in it, and yet it will be to little purpose if your general deportment be not in correspondence with your conversation, whereas, on the other hand, a uniformly holy example will give to the same conversation a point and energy not easily resisted. So also you may engage actively in the promotion of benevolent objects and may bring large gifts to the treasury of the Lord. And if this is not of a piece with your daily walk, instead of stimulating others to nobler deeds of charity, it is not improbable that the charge of ostentation will be made behind your back, if it is not rung in your ears. But beside the influence which a holy example exerts in giving effect to individual acts of beneficence, there is a more general and more direct influence, which may be calculated upon with absolute certainty. A devoted life addresses itself, silently indeed, but most powerfully, to persons of every description. To the careless sinner and to the slumbering Christian it brings reproof and admonition. To those who are awakened to the importance of religion, it proffers a most persuasive invitation to comply with the terms of the gospel. And to those who are actively engaged in doing their master's business, it holds out encouragement to increased activity and perseverance. In short, a true Christian example is a living epistle, known and read of all men. To this point, then, let me entreat you, my young friends, to give diligent heed. See that your conversation be in all respects as becometh the gospel of Christ. See that the spirit of piety shed its kindly influence over your whole life. In whatever circumstances you are placed, exhibit the humility, the consistency, the dignified firmness that belongs to the Christian character. I exhort you to this now, not as a matter of comfort, but as a matter of usefulness, as a means of doing good. And I repeat that there is in the Christian life a power over the hearts and consciences of men of the extent of which you have probably never conceived. And if this is true of the Christian life in any circumstances, suffer me to say that it is especially true of it when it is exhibited by the young. Let an elevated tone of piety appear in a young Christian. Let him be at once humble, active, and consistent, and he will diffuse around him a light which, perhaps beyond almost any other, will lead men to glorify our Father who is in heaven. The last means of doing good which I shall specify is prayer. In a preceding discourse I have spoken of its importance as a means of growth in grace. I now remark that it is not less important as a means of doing good. The kind of prayer to which I here especially refer is, of course, intercession. I stop now to inquire in respect to the nature of the connection between asking and receiving. It is sufficient for us to know that there is such a connection, that God has commanded us to ask, and has promised, if we ask aright, that we shall receive. And He is as ready to hear the prayers which we offer in behalf of others as of ourselves. Not that every prayer we offer will be answered in the very manner and in the very time which we may expect or desire. Still, it is true, literally true, that praying breath is never spent in vain. And we shall ultimately know that all our prayers offered with faith in the Savior have been answered in the best manner possible, in the way which infinite wisdom and goodness has dictated. In some respects, you will instantly perceive that prayer possesses an advantage over every other means of doing good. It is a means which you may employ with its full effect when you are unable to employ any other. Perhaps you have an irreligious friend who has steadily resisted all your efforts for his salvation, who has even treated your affectionate counsels and expostulations with contempt, insomuch that you have become satisfied that you have done all for him in that way that you can ever do. Must you then absolutely give him up and sit down with the heart-rending reflection that he must certainly perish? No. You may enter into your closet, and on his behalf commune with your Father who seeth in secret, and there perhaps, when all other means have failed, you may prevail with God to create within him a clean heart. Or you may be laid in the providence of God upon a sick bed, and you may think with deep concern of the salvation of sinners around you, and yet be unable to reach them with the voice of expostulation. Or you may think of the noble institutions of Christian charity which bless our land, and yet be too poor to contribute a farthing to aid their operation. But in either case, you can wield the most powerful engine that God has put into the hands of mortals, and it may be that you will actually accomplish more on that bed of sickness than many around you who have health and property, and a profusion of the means of active benevolence. And then again, let it not be forgotten that unless all your other efforts to do good are crowned with prayer, you have no assurance that they will be of any avail. Or if they should, by God's grace, be made instrumental of good to others, they will bring no blessings into your own bosom. And let me say, too, that the spirit of prayer is the spirit of beneficence, and it is in the closet, in the worshiping assembly, and universally at the throne of grace, that the Christian's heart is quickened to its highest impulse of benevolent action. I say then, my young friends, pray without ceasing. Pray in season and out of season. Pray for your friends and your enemies. Pray for those who are near at hand and those who are afar off. Pray for the whole family of man. Pray with deep humility, with true faith, with earnest perseverance, and you shall know, probably in this world, if not at the judgment, that in these importunate wrestlings you were doing a greater amount of good to the souls of your fellow men than you have the power to calculate. Perhaps that you were clothing the wilderness with moral verdure and causing the dark places of the earth to echo with the sounds of salvation. I have now specified some of the most important means of doing good, means which in a greater or less degree are within the reach of all of you. Let me here only add that your worldly calling, whatever it may be, ought to be regarded by you in the same light as an important means of benefiting your fellow men. In whatever sphere Providence may call you to labor, you are to bear in mind that your efforts are not to terminate in mere self-gratification, but are to have respect to the higher purposes of doing good to others and of glorifying God. End of section 29.